Wilma Thompson, 65 years old and bursting with motherly pride that was me on what should have been the happiest day of my daughter Jessica's life. I arrived at the Grand Willow Hotel, clutching a carefully wrapped gift, my heart full of love despite our recent disagreements. Then I saw her face change when she spotted me across the marble lobby. What came next broke something in me that 30 years of motherhood had built. "Mom, I am sorry, but you were not invited. Please go away." Before continuing this heartbreaking story, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button. Jessica was my only child, the light of my life after losing my husband Thomas to cancer when she was just 4 years old. I raised her alone, working 2 jobs at the local hospital as a nurse during days and waitressing weekends to ensure she never felt the absence of a second income. We were inseparable during those early years. Every Sunday was our special day. We would make blueberry pancakes together, her tiny hands covered in flour, as she giggled, then spend afternoons at the neighborhood park, where I would push her on the swings until my arms ached. I can still picture her at 6 years old, missing her front teeth beaming up at me as we built sandcastles in the small playground sandbox. "Mommy, we are the best team ever," she would declare proudly. Those words became our family motto, repeated through scraped knees, school projects, and the inevitable moments when she missed having a father. As Jessica grew into her teenage years, she remained sweet and considerate. While other parents complained about rebellious phases, Jessica maintained her straight-A average and even started volunteering at the hospital where I worked. I still remember her 16th birthday when she hugged me and whispered, "I know how hard you work for us, Mom. Someday I will make you proud." That moment crystallized everything I had worked for. Jessica had inherited my practical nature, but also her father's ambition. Thomas had been working toward a management position when his diagnosis derailed everything. Perhaps Jessica felt she needed to fulfill his unfinished dreams. She joined every business club at school, took advanced placement classes, and talked constantly about attending a prestigious university. The guidance counselor once told me, "Your daughter has a hunger for success that I rarely see in students her age. It is impressive, but make sure she knows her worth is not tied to achievement." I assured him that Jessica understood our family values of kindness and integrity mattered more than status. Looking back now, I wonder if I reinforced that message enough. After high school, Jessica earned a scholarship to State University to study business management. I took out a second mortgage on our modest home to cover the remaining expenses, determined that my daughter would graduate debt-free. Those college years flew by with weekly phone calls and monthly visits. Jessica thrived academically and socially, joining the business club and eventually becoming its president. I remember helping her move into her freshman dorm, carrying boxes up 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken. Other parents hired movers or brought multiple family members to help, but Jessica and I managed on our own as we always had. That night before I drove back home, she hugged me tightly. "Thanks for everything, Mom. I am going to build us a better life. Just wait and see." It was during her senior year that everything began to change. Jessica met Brandon Keller, the son of real estate mogul Richard Keller, at a networking event. When she first brought him home during spring break, I noticed his designer clothes and the casual way he talked about European vacations and second homes. Still, he seemed genuinely interested in Jessica, and her happiness was all that mattered to me. I tried to make a good impression, preparing her favorite childhood meals and showing Brandon our modest family photo albums. He was polite, but I caught him glancing around our small living room with barely concealed assessment. When Jessica gave him a tour of our home, I overheard him ask, "Your mom has lived here your whole life." The slight note of disbelief in his voice made my cheeks burn with an emotion I refused to name. After graduation, Jessica accepted a position at Keller Enterprises, moving to the city where Brandon worked in his father's company. Our weekly calls became monthly, then sporadic. When she did call, our conversations revolved around the glamorous parties she attended, the important people she met, and increasingly Brandon. "Mom, you would not believe the summer home the Kellers have. 3 swimming pools and a private beach access. Margaret, that is Brandon's mother, has offered to take me shopping at her favorite boutiques." Her voice had taken on a breathless quality when she spoke of these things, a hunger I had never heard before. Each time Jessica visited, which became increasingly rare, she seemed more polished, less like the daughter I had raised. Her clothes were expensive, her manner more reserved. She began correcting my grammar or giving me helpful suggestions about updating my appearance or home decor. Each small correction felt like a paper cut, insignificant alone, but painful in accumulation. The proposal came after 2 years of dating. Brandon gave her a diamond ring that cost more than my house, presenting it during a helicopter tour over the city. Jessica called me immediately afterward, her voice breathless with excitement. "Mom, you would not believe what just happened," Brandon proposed, and I said yes. Despite my growing concerns about the distance between us, I pushed aside my worries and focused on her happiness. "That is wonderful, sweetheart," I said, tears of complicated joy in my eyes. "I cannot wait to help plan the wedding." Her hesitation should have been my first warning. About that, Mom, the Kellers have some pretty specific ideas about what the wedding should be like. They know a lot of important people. Of course, I reassured her. "But I want to contribute too. I have been saving for your wedding since you were born. $45,000 set aside carefully over decades, skipping vacations and driving the same car for 15 years. It was my gift to her, my investment in her happiness." When Jessica came to visit the following weekend, I could already sense a shift in her. Her clothing was different, more expensive and formal. Her speech patterns had changed, adopting the clipped, confident tone I had heard from Brandon. Even her hairstyle was transformed, the natural waves I had always loved, now straightened into a severe, sophisticated bob. Over coffee at my kitchen table, the same table where we had done her homework and celebrated birthdays, she began outlining the Kellers' vision for the wedding. Her words were enthusiastic, but her eyes kept darting away from mine. A telltale sign from childhood that she was not being entirely truthful. "The Kellers have connections with the best wedding planners in the country," she informed me over coffee. "They know exactly how to create the perfect society wedding." I smiled through my unease. "That sounds lovely, but remember, this is your wedding. What do you want?" Jessica looked at me as if I had said something naive. "Mom, this is not just about what I want. This is about making connections about Brandon and me, establishing ourselves in society. The Kellers know how these things work." By the end of that visit, I had written a check for my entire wedding savings, trying to see it as an investment in our continued closeness rather than the beginning of the end. As Jessica drove away, I stood in my driveway, watching until her car disappeared around the corner, a sense of foreboding settling over me like an invisible cloak. The first wedding planning meeting took place at the Keller Mansion, a sprawling estate that made me feel small as I drove through the gates in my 10-year-old sedan. I had spent extra time on my appearance that morning, wearing my best blazer and the pearl earrings Thomas had given me for our 5th anniversary. Still, as I parked among the luxury vehicles, I felt conspicuously out of place. Margaret Keller, Brandon's mother, greeted me with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. She wore pearls even though it was barely noon, her blonde hair immaculately styled. Her handshake was brief and cool, her gaze assessing me in one swift glance. "Wilma, how nice of you to join us," she said, leading me to a sunroom where Jessica Brandon and a slim woman with a tablet sat waiting. Jessica rose to greet me, kissing my cheek quickly. I noticed she was dressed almost identically to Margaret, in a pale blue dress with understated jewelry. The Jessica I knew had always preferred bright colors and comfortable clothes. This stranger with my daughter's face seemed to be playing a role in someone else's production. "This is Vivienne, our wedding planner," Margaret explained. "She has organized events for senators and CEOs. I reached out to shake Vivienne's hand. "Lovely to meet you. I have some ideas I would love to share about the wedding." "Oh, how quaint," Margaret commented. "But Vivienne has already created a comprehensive vision board based on our family traditions." Throughout that 3-hour meeting, I watched as every decision was made without my input. The venue would be the Grand Willow Hotel where the Kellers had hosted charity galas. The guest list expanded to 400 people, most of whom I had never heard of. The flowers would be imported, the menu curated by a celebrity chef, the music provided by a string quartet Jessica had never expressed interest in before. Each time I tried to suggest something meaningful, a family tradition, or something that reflected Jessica's personality, Margaret would intercept. "A father-daughter dance to Sweet Child of Mine. I hardly think so. Brandenburg Concerto No. 4 is the appropriate choice." Jessica, to my growing dismay, nodded along with each of Margaret's pronouncements, occasionally glancing at me apologetically, but never disagreeing. Brandon remained largely silent, deferring to his mother with practiced ease. At one point, I mentioned that Jessica had always loved the idea of incorporating sunflowers into her wedding, a nod to the fields we used to visit during summer drives. Margaret actually laughed. "Sunflowers. How rustic. We will be using white orchids and roses exclusively, much more elegant." I looked to Jessica, expecting her to defend this small piece of her authentic self. Instead, she smiled tightly and said, "Orchids are growing on me, Mom. They are very sophisticated." After the meeting, I pulled Jessica aside in the garden. The manicured landscape was beautiful but sterile, lacking the wild charm of the parks where Jessica had played as a child. "Sweetheart, this feels like the Kellers' wedding, not yours. What about the things you always wanted? Remember how you talked about a beach ceremony when you were younger?" Jessica sighed, checking her diamond-studded watch. "Mom, I was a child then. This is about creating the right impression. The Kellers are introducing us to people who can help our careers. You need to understand how important this is. More important than what you want, than who you are." Her expression hardened slightly. "This is who I am now. I wish you could be happy for me instead of trying to drag me back to some small-town ideas about weddings." That comment stung, but I swallowed my hurt. "I just want you to be happy, Jessica." "Then trust that I know what will make me happy," she replied, already walking back toward the house. The following weeks brought more of the same. I was technically included in planning emails, but my suggestions were politely ignored. When I offered to host a small bridal shower with Jessica's childhood friends, Margaret had already arranged a lavish affair at an exclusive country club with guests I had never met. Jessica's childhood friend Amber called me confused. "Wilma, I just wanted to check if I am still invited to Jessica's bridal shower. I have not received an invitation." My heart sank as I explained that the guest list had been taken over by the Kellers. Amber's silence spoke volumes. "I understand," she finally said. "Jessica has moved on to bigger things, I guess. It is just sad. We have been friends since kindergarten." I wanted to defend my daughter, to explain that she was just caught up in the excitement of her new life. but the words felt hollow even in my own mind. The final straw came during a dress fitting I had been invited to, almost as an afterthought. The bridal salon was in the city's most exclusive shopping district, its interior all white and crystal, with champagne served in delicate flutes. I felt like an intruder in my sensible shoes and department store dress. Jessica emerged from the dressing room in a sleek, modern gown that cost as much as a car. She looked beautiful, of course, but there was nothing of her personality in the severe lines and minimal detailing. "You look beautiful," I said sincerely, "though it is different from what you always described as your dream dress." "Mom, please," Jessica hissed as the boutique owner circled her with pins. "This is what is in style now." Margaret interjected smoothly. "The designer is a personal friend. He has dressed European royalty." When I suggested a small addition, perhaps Grandma Rose's lace handkerchief as something borrowed and blue, Margaret laughed lightly. "That would completely throw off the lines of the gown. We are not doing some backyard potluck wedding." I saw Jessica flinch at those words, but she said nothing in defense of our family traditions. Instead, she turned to examine her reflection, smoothing the expensive fabric with hands that seemed to belong to a stranger. Later in the boutique's elegant sitting area, I tried one last time to connect with my daughter. "Jessica, I know the Kellers have experience with these grand events, but this day should still reflect you, the real you." Jessica set down her champagne glass with a sharp click. "The real me is not who you think I am anymore, Mom. I have grown up, moved on. Maybe you should try to do the same instead of clinging to outdated ideas." I recoiled as if slapped. "I see." Rising shakily to my feet, I gathered my purse. "I will give you some space, then." As I left, I heard Margaret say to Jessica, "Darling, perhaps it would be easier if your mother focused on her contribution rather than the planning itself." That night was the first time I cried myself to sleep over my daughter since her father died. The pain was different, but no less acute a loss. Not to death, but to transformation. The daughter I had raised was disappearing before my eyes, replaced by someone who viewed me and our shared history as embarrassing liabilities. The weeks following our argument at the boutique were filled with deafening silence. My calls went to voicemail. My texts received brief, non-committal responses. I followed the wedding preparations through social media posts where Jessica tagged the florist, the venue, the photographer, each more exclusive than the last. I would sit in my living room scrolling through images of Jessica at parties and events, with the Kellers analyzing her smile for signs of genuine happiness. Was this truly what she wanted? Or had she been seduced by wealth and status into believing this was the only path to fulfillment? My friend Eleanor, whom I had known since nursing school, stopped by one evening to find me scrolling through photos of the bridal shower I had not been invited to. 40 women in designer dresses drinking champagne beside a pool larger than my entire yard. No Amber, no childhood friends, no one who had known Jessica before Brandon. "Wilma, you need to talk to Jessica directly," she advised, pouring us both a glass of wine. "This silent treatment is not fair to you." "I have tried," I admitted. "She is always too busy or rushing off to another appointment." Eleanor examined a photo of Jessica, with Margaret Keller both wearing nearly identical outfits and expressions. "She looks different." "She is different. Sometimes I wonder if I even know who she is anymore." Eleanor had known Jessica since she was a baby, had been there through Thomas's illness and death, had watched me struggle and persevere as a single mother. Her perspective had always been invaluable to me. People change, Wilma, especially when they are trying to fit into a new world. But real change comes from within, not from adapting to someone else's expectations. Jessica may need to learn that lesson the hard way. I sighed, setting aside my phone. I just want her to be happy. But is she really? Look at those photos. Does she look happy to you? Or does she look like someone trying desperately to belong? Eleanor's question haunted me for days afterward. I began to notice the tension in Jessica's smile in photos, the way her posture seemed rigid rather than relaxed. In one candid shot from an engagement party, I caught a glimpse of uncertainty in her eyes that reminded me of the little girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. A week before the wedding, I still had not received an invitation. Surely that was an oversight, I reasoned. After all, my money was paying for a significant portion of this extravaganza. I called Jessica, directly determined to clear the air. "Sweetheart, I hate that things have been strained between us, and I just realized I never received my formal invitation to the wedding." The pause that followed stretched too long. "Oh, about that." Jessica began, her voice unnaturally high. "We had to make some adjustments to the guest list. Some of Richard's business associates needed to be included, and the venue has strict capacity limits." My heart dropped. "Jessica, what are you saying? I am your mother." "Of course you will be there," she said quickly. "We just might not have a formal place setting for you at the dinner. Maybe you could help with some of the behind-the-scenes details." The implication that I would be some sort of unpaid worker rather than an honored guest at my only daughter's wedding felt like a physical blow. But I swallowed my hurt once again. "I see. Well, I would be happy to help however I can." After that call, something shifted in me. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel anger alongside the hurt. I had given everything for Jessica, supported her unconditionally, and now I was being treated as an inconvenience. I called Eleanor immediately, my voice shaking, as I recounted the conversation. "She wants me to work at the wedding, like hired help." Eleanor's outrage matched my own. "That is beyond disrespectful, Wilma. It is cruel. What should I do? If I refuse, I might not see her get married at all. The question is, what message are you sending if you accept this treatment, that it is okay for her to devalue you this way?" I had no answer. All my life I had prioritized Jessica's happiness above my own. The thought of standing up for myself, of potentially causing a permanent rift, terrified me. But the alternative, accepting this fundamental disrespect, felt equally impossible. Still, she was my daughter. I loved her. And so, despite everything I went shopping for, a mother of the bride dress, something elegant but not flashy, something that would help me fit into the world she had chosen. I spent more than I could afford on a pale blue silk dress, and matching jacket, had my hair styled, even splurged on professional makeup for the occasion. I wrote her a card expressing my love and enclosed a family heirloom, a simple pearl necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. It was not grand or expensive by Keller standards, but it carried the weight of generations of strong women. Perhaps it would remind Jessica of where she came from, of who she had been. When I tried calling again to confirm details for the wedding day, my calls went straight to voicemail. I finally received a terse text. "Very busy with final preparations. Will see you at the wedding." The night before the wedding, I laid out my outfit, packed the wrapped gift and card, and set my alarm. Despite everything, excitement fluttered in my chest. My little girl was getting married. Surely the day itself would bridge the gap between us. I fell asleep looking at an old photograph on my nightstand, Jessica at 5 years old, sitting on my lap, both of us laughing at something long forgotten. We had been a team then, the two of us, against the world. Somewhere along the way, She had chosen a different team. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, as if the weather itself was celebrating. I woke early, too nervous to sleep, and began preparing with careful attention to detail. My hair was styled in soft waves, my makeup understated but flattering. The blue dress fit perfectly, and I added small pearl earrings to complement the necklace I would give Jessica. As I drove to the Grand Willow Hotel, I practiced what I would say when I saw her. Nothing accusatory, nothing that would add stress to her big day. Just love and support the way I had always tried to show up for her. The hotel was transformed for the occasion, with white roses and crystal decorations adorning the grand entrance. Limousines and luxury cars lined the circular driveway, disgorging guests in formal attire. I felt a momentary flicker of insecurity as I handed my keys to the valet, but straightened my shoulders and walked in with dignity. The lobby was buzzing with well-dressed people, many of whom seemed to know each other. I recognized no one from Jessica's childhood or our family circles. These were all Keller connections, I realized. The atmosphere was elegant but impersonal, nothing like the warm, joyful wedding I had always envisioned for my daughter. When I approached the welcome table to ask where the bridal suite was, the young attendant looked confused. "Your name, please." "Wilma Thompson. I am the mother of the bride." She scanned her tablet with a frown. "I do not see you on the list, Miss Thompson." There must be a mistake. I insisted, my smile growing strained. "Jessica Thompson is my daughter." "One moment, please." She stepped away to consult with someone, whispered conversation ensuing. I stood there acutely aware of curious glances from nearby guests. My carefully applied makeup felt like a mask, my new dress suddenly too tight. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, watching my only child marry. Instead, I was being treated like an uninvited stranger. While waiting, I noticed Jessica's childhood friend Amber entering with her husband. Finally, a familiar face I waved, and she came over, giving me a warm hug. "Wilma, it is so good to see you." I was surprised to get an invitation out of the blue after not hearing from Jessica for years. My confusion must have shown on my face because she quickly added, "I guess the Kellers wanted to include everyone who might have connections in the publishing industry. My husband's family owns several magazines." So Jessica had not invited her oldest friend out of sentiment, but because the Kellers saw strategic value in the connection. Another piece of my heart cracked at this realization. "How have you been?" Amber asked kindly. "Jessica mentioned you might be helping behind the scenes today." Before I could respond to this fresh humiliation, I caught sight of Jessica herself, emerging from a side door in a robe clearly between preparations. Our eyes met across the marble expanse of the lobby. For one fleeting moment, I saw my little girl again in her face, a flash of the child who had once run to me with skinned knees and school art projects. Then her expression changed to something between panic and annoyance. She quickly crossed to me, taking my arm and guiding me toward a quiet alcove away from curious eyes. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she hissed her perfect makeup, unable to hide her flush of embarrassment. "What do you mean?" "It is your wedding day." "Of course I am here." Jessica glanced around nervously. "I thought I made it clear on the phone. We do not have space for you at the ceremony or reception." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "But I am your mother. I helped pay for this wedding. And we appreciate the contribution," she said, the word stinging like a slap. "But Margaret and Richard have a very specific vision for today. Their business associates the press coverage. Everyone here is connected in important ways. And I am not connected enough. Not important enough to see my own daughter get married." My voice cracked despite my efforts to remain calm. Jessica looked pained but resolute. "Mom, I am sorry, but you were not invited. Please go away. You are making a scene." I became aware that several nearby guests were watching our exchange with poorly disguised interest. Humiliation washed over me in a hot wave. The Hendersons specifically asked that the guest list remain exclusive. Jessica continued, lowering her voice. "They think you would not fit in with this crowd." In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity what had happened. My daughter, the person I had given my life to raising and loving, had erased me from her special day to please her wealthy in-laws. I was an embarrassment, a reminder of her less polished origins. "I see," I said quietly, my heart shattering into pieces so small. I wondered if they could ever be found again. "I will not embarrass you further, then." Jessica had the grace to look ashamed, but she did not contradict me or ask me to stay. "I will call you tomorrow," she offered weakly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak again. With all the dignity I could muster, I turned and walked back through the lobby, past the curious stares and whispered comments. Amber caught my eye, her expression horrified as she realized what had happened, but I could not bear to stop and explain. The valet brought my car, his cheerful "congratulations" dying on his lips when he saw my expression. I managed a wan smile and a generous tip before driving away from what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. I did not cry until I was safely in my car, the gift for my daughter still sitting on the passenger seat beside me. Then the tears came hot and fast, blurring the road ahead. I had to pull over, overcome by the magnitude of the rejection. My own child had looked me in the eyes and told me I was not welcome at her wedding, that I was an embarrassment to be hidden away. 30 years of love and sacrifice dismissed in a moment of social climbing. The pain was unlike anything I had experienced, even Thomas's death. At least then Jessica and I had faced the loss together. Now I was alone, excised from my daughter's life as neatly as if I had never existed. The drive home passed in a blur of tears and disbelief. Had that really happened? Had my only child, the baby I had nursed through fevers and nightmares, the girl I had raised alone through hardship and sacrifice, really turned me away from her wedding? I pulled into my driveway and sat there, engine off, unable to summon the energy to go inside. My house suddenly seemed painfully empty, a monument to a family that no longer existed in any meaningful way. When I finally went in, the first thing I saw was the wall of photographs chronicling Jessica's life. Her first steps, kindergarten, graduation, high school, prom, college, commencement. My entire adult life had been dedicated to her happiness and success. And now, at the culmination of all those years of love and effort, I had been deemed unsuitable for inclusion. The enormity of the betrayal washed over me in waves. I sank onto the couch, still in my carefully chosen outfit, and stared at nothing. The gift for Jessica sat beside me, beautifully wrapped and completely meaningless now. The phone rang, startling me from my daze. It was Eleanor. "How was the wedding? Did you and Jessica patch things up?" The question broke the dam, and I found myself sobbing as I related what had happened. Eleanor's gasps of outrage were strangely comforting. "She did what, Wilma, that is beyond hurtful. That is cruel." "I do not understand how we got here," I admitted. "When did my sweet girl become someone who could do this?" Eleanor was silent for a moment. "I am coming over," she declared. "Do not move." 20 minutes later, Eleanor arrived with a bottle of wine and fierce indignation on my behalf. As we sat in my living room, the story poured out of me in its entirety, every slight and dismissal leading up to this final rejection. "You know what makes it worse," I said, staring into my wine glass. "I paid for so much of this wedding. $45,000, my entire savings, money I had set aside for my retirement." Eleanor frowned. "How did you pay it?" "Credit card deposits to all the vendors. Jessica said it was easier to track that way." "So you put down deposits for a wedding. You were then barred from attending. That is not just emotionally abusive, it is financial exploitation." I had not thought of it in those terms, but Eleanor's words resonated with a truth I had been avoiding. I had been used plain and simple. "What would you do?" I asked her. Eleanor did not hesitate. "I would cancel every single payment. If you are not good enough to attend as the mother of the bride, then your money is not good enough to pay for their extravaganza." The idea was shocking at first. Cancel the payments, potentially ruin the wedding. But as the evening wore on and my hurt crystallized into righteous anger, the idea took root. This was not just about being excluded from a party. This was about my daughter allowing me to be treated as less than human as an ATM with no feelings or dignity. This was about standing up for myself after a lifetime of putting everyone else first. "You know what? You are right," I finally said, straightening my shoulders. "No me, no wedding." Eleanor squeezed my hand. It is time Wilma Thompson remembered her own worth. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table and spread out all the vendor contracts and credit card statements. Every major expense for this wedding had been charged to my accounts: the venue deposit, the catering, the flowers, the photographer, the band, all of it secured with my financial information and authorized by me. The realization of how thoroughly I had been taken advantage of hardened my resolve. My daughter had not only rejected me emotionally, but had used me financially in the process. There had to be consequences for such callousness. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. My hand trembled slightly, but my voice was steady when I began making calls. This was not vindictiveness, I told myself. This was self-respect, something I had allowed to erode over years of placing Jessica's needs above my own. My first call was to my credit card company. I explained that I needed to dispute several charges and cancel payment authorizations. The representative was sympathetic when I explained the situation. "I understand, Miss Thompson. We can definitely flag these as unauthorized charges going forward." Next, I systematically contacted each vendor, explaining that I was revoking payment authorization. Many were surprisingly understanding. "I have a daughter myself," the florist said. "What happened to you just is not right." The venue manager was more hesitant, but ultimately professional. "We will need to inform the wedding party immediately about the payment situation." "I understand," I replied, my voice steady. "Please do." With each call, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. I was not vindictively trying to hurt Jessica, but I was finally standing up for myself after a lifetime of acquiescence. The financial reality was simple. I could not afford to bankroll a celebration I was deemed too embarrassing to attend. As I made the final call to the wedding band, I glanced at the clock. The ceremony would be starting soon. Part of me ached at the thought of not seeing my daughter walk down the aisle, but a stronger part recognized that I had not been given a choice in the matter. Jessica and the Kellers had made their position clear. Now I was making mine clear as well. It was nearly 8 o'clock in the evening when my phone began ringing incessantly. Jessica's name flashed on the screen again and again. I let it go to voicemail, not yet ready for that conversation. Then Brandon called, then numbers I did not recognize. Finally, I answered a call from a blocked number. "Wilma Thompson speaking." "What the hell do you think you are doing?" The sharp voice of Richard Keller sliced through the line. The caterers are demanding payment. The band has stopped playing. Do you have any idea of the embarrassment you have caused? I believe I understand embarrassment quite well after today, I replied, surprised by my own calmness. This is extortion, he sputtered. We will sue you for every penny. Mr. Keller, I simply canceled payments for services at an event I was explicitly uninvited from. I believe any judge would understand my position. You spiteful vindictive. I suggest you find alternative payment arrangements if you wish the reception to continue, I interrupted. Goodbye, Mr. Keller. I hung up, hands shaking but resolve intact. More calls came, which I ignored. Text messages appeared, ranging from pleading to threatening. I turned off my phone and made myself a cup of tea, sitting in the quiet of my kitchen and allowing myself to feel the complicated emotions washing through me. Less than an hour later, the pounding on my front door began. I opened it to find Jessica still in her wedding dress. Mascara streaked down her face, Brandon hovering uncertainly behind her. "How could you?" she shouted, pushing past me into the house. "You ruined everything." The band stopped in the middle of a song. The caterers took back the food. Everyone was whispering and staring. I closed the door quietly. Now you know how it feels. What? To be humiliated in public. To be deemed unworthy of basic respect. Jessica threw her hands up. This is not the same thing. This was my wedding day. And I am your mother, I replied, my voice breaking slightly. The person who has loved you every day of your life. The person who worked 2 jobs to give you everything I could. The person you decided was too embarrassing to witness your marriage. Brandon stepped forward, his expression uncomfortable. Mrs. Thompson, surely we can work something out. If you reinstate the payments, my father is willing to forget this misunderstanding. I looked at him, this polished young man, who had stood by while his family erased me from my daughter's life. This is not a negotiation, Brandon. And it is certainly not a misunderstanding. Jessica made her choice very clear today. Mom, please. Jessica's anger crumbled into pleading. Everyone is waiting. We can talk about this tomorrow. No, Jessica. We are talking about it now. For years I have let you pull away, change yourself, to please the Kellers, treat me as an afterthought. I told myself it was part of you growing up, but today crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. What do you want from me? She cried. I wanted to see my only child get married. I wanted to be treated with basic human dignity. Since that was apparently too much to ask, I decided my money should not attend a celebration I was barred from. Jessica's face hardened. So this is revenge. This is consequences, I corrected her. Something you have rarely faced in your life, largely because I worked so hard to smooth your path. Brandon tugged at Jessica's arm. We should go. My father is trying to salvage what he can of the reception. Jessica stared at me, a stranger in a white dress. I will never forgive you for this. As they turned to leave, I spoke one last time. When you are ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect, my door will be open. But I will never again allow myself to be used and discarded, not even by you. After they left, I sank onto my couch, emotionally exhausted, but strangely unburdened. For the first time in decades, I had chosen myself. I knew there would be fallout from my decision. The Kellers might well pursue legal action, though I doubted they would want the public embarrassment of explaining why the mother of the bride had not been welcome at the wedding. Jessica might hold true to her word and never forgive me. I might have lost my daughter forever. Yet underneath the pain was a surprising clarity. I had spent my entire adult life defining myself as Jessica's mother, subsuming my own needs and identity to that role. Perhaps it was time to rediscover who Wilma Thompson was beyond motherhood, to build a life that valued my own dignity and happiness. I picked up the gift I had brought to the wedding, carefully unwrapping the pearl necklace. I fastened it around my own neck, feeling the weight of generations of women who had faced their own hardships with grace and resilience. No wedding had been about more than money. It had been about reclaiming my self-worth. The weeks following the wedding disaster were difficult. I weathered angry calls from Margaret Keller, thinly veiled threats from Richard, and silence from Jessica. Social media erupted with versions of the story, most painting me as the villain who ruined a society wedding out of spite. I took a leave of absence from work, unable to face the whispers and stares. Eleanor visited daily, bringing food and reassurance. "This will pass," she promised, "and you did nothing wrong." Slowly, I began to rebuild my life, a life that for too long had revolved entirely around Jessica. I joined a book club, reconnected with nursing school friends, started volunteering at a local animal shelter. Each small step away from defining myself solely as Jessica's mother felt both terrifying and exhilarating. 3 months after the wedding, I did something I had always dreamed of, but repeatedly postponed. I booked a trip to Italy. 2 weeks, exploring Rome, Florence, and the Amalfi Coast, using some of the money I had saved by canceling the wedding payments. It felt like a declaration of independence. On my last night in Positano, watching the sunset over the Mediterranean, I realized I was smiling without effort for the first time in months. The ache of Jessica's rejection had not disappeared, but it had softened, becoming part of me rather than defining me. I returned home renewed and began making other changes. I sold my large family home and bought a charming condo closer to the hospital. I enrolled in courses to upgrade my nursing credentials, finding intellectual stimulation I had neglected for years. 6 months after the wedding, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a brief note from Brandon. "Mrs. Thompson, I want to apologize for my part in what happened. The truth is, Jessica never wanted to exclude you. My parents insisted, threatening to withdraw their financial support and connections if the wedding did not meet their standards. Jessica was wrong to agree, but she was caught between impossible choices. I should have stood up for both of you. Our marriage is struggling under the weight of my parents' constant interference. Perhaps you can find it in your heart to reach out to Jessica. She misses you more than she will admit. Respectfully, Brandon." I read the letter several times, emotions swirling. It did not excuse Jessica's actions, but offered context I had not considered. Had she been manipulated by the Kellers even more than I realized? I did not contact Jessica immediately. The wound was still too raw, and I needed to be certain of my own boundaries before reopening communication. Instead, I continued building my independent life, discovering parts of myself that had been submerged in motherhood for decades. Nearly a year after the wedding, my phone rang with Jessica's number. I answered after several rings, my heart pounding. "Mom." Her voice sounded small, uncertain, more like the child I remembered than the polished stranger she had become. "Hello, Jessica. I was wondering if we could meet sometime to talk." We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. When she arrived, I almost did not recognize her. Gone was the severe hairstyle and formal clothing. She looked younger, more natural, and very, very tired. "Thank you for coming," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "How are you, Jessica?" She attempted a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Brandon and I separated 3 months ago. He is filing for divorce." "I am sorry to hear that." "Do not be. It was necessary." She twisted her napkin nervously. After the wedding, things got worse. His parents tried to control everything: where we lived, how we spent our money, when we would have children. It was suffocating. I listened without interrupting as she described the gradual unraveling of her marriage and her awakening to the toxic dynamics at play. I kept thinking about what you said that night about mutual respect, about not allowing yourself to be used and discarded. It made me look at my relationship with the Kellers differently, and with you. She reached across the table, not quite touching me. Mom, I am so deeply sorry for what I did to you. There is no excuse. I was selfish and cruel and weak. Why? I asked simply. Why did you shut me out that way? Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I wanted so badly to belong in their world. The prestige, the connections, the sense of importance. And they made it clear from the beginning that you were an obstacle to that. And you chose them. She nodded, shame evident in every line of her body. I betrayed the one person who had always been there for me, all for people who discarded me the moment I stopped playing by their rules. We talked for hours that day, painful, honest conversations about hurt, betrayal, and the possibility of forgiveness. I did not promise immediate reconciliation, but I did agree to begin rebuilding slowly and with clear boundaries. Over the following months, Jessica and I established a new kind of relationship. No longer the enmeshed mother-daughter dynamic of her childhood, nor the distant formality of her Keller years, but something more balanced. She entered therapy to work through her experiences, and sometimes invited me to join sessions that pertained to our relationship. 2 years after the disastrous wedding, Jessica launched her own small business consulting firm without any Keller connections or influence. When she invited me to the opening celebration, she introduced me to everyone as my mother, my first and best teacher in both business and life. As for me, I continued nurturing my independent identity. I retired from nursing, but began teaching part-time at the community college. I dated occasionally, traveled often, and built a rich community of friends and activities. Looking back now, I recognize that what happened, painful as it was, freed both Jessica and me from unhealthy patterns. She needed to learn that true love does not require erasing parts of yourself or others. I needed to learn that loving someone does not mean accepting mistreatment. The greatest lesson came to me on a simple Sunday afternoon when Jessica stopped by with ingredients for blueberry pancakes, a callback to our tradition from her childhood. As we moved around my kitchen laughing and talking, I realized that forgiveness is not forgetting the wound, but allowing it to transform into wisdom. I still have the wedding gift I never gave her tucked away in a drawer. Perhaps someday, if she finds a relationship built on authenticity and respect, I will give her the family pearls. But they no longer represent my worth as a mother or a woman. They are simply an heirloom, not my identity. To anyone who has been rejected by someone they love, I offer this truth. Your value does not diminish because someone failed to see it. Standing up for yourself is not spite, it is self-preservation. And sometimes the hardest act of love is allowing consequences to unfold, rather than rushing to smooth the path. No Me, No Wedding was not just about canceled payments. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my worth, and ultimately my life. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to stand up for yourself, even when it meant risking a relationship? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more life lessons from someone who has learned them the hard way. Thank you for listening. And remember, your worth is never determined by how others treat you, but by how you treat yourself.